Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Histories Uncharted. My name is Shanna. I am your host today, and I am joined with my amazing co-host, Cecilia.
Hello.
And we are here to continue our spooky Halloween season. We're really excited to present an entire month of really gross, macabre, and fun, creepy, gory stories that we find fascinating, and hopefully you enjoy them too. So last episode we did Vlad the Impaler.
Dracula.
The inspiration for Dracula.
It was a really, really fun episode. I enjoyed his tale.
I did too. So. He's fun. And so today we're going to talk about the amazing Edgar Allan Poe and his life and his works and his tortured soul. This episode is being released on Monday, October 7th, which is the 174th anniversary of the death of Edgar Allan Poe. So we just wanted to give a shout out and say happy death-iversary, Edgar.
Happy death-iversary, Edgar.
And then for the rest of October, we'll have different fun, spooky episodes coming up.
All right. So in discussing Edgar Allan Poe, is he really amazing? I don't know. I would say his works are amazing as a person. I don't think Edgar Allan Poe is my favorite person. Maybe we'll get into that. Maybe we won't.
I always feel that amazing is subjective anyway.
All right.
So I was going to really pull out and go, is anyone really ever amazing? Were his works cool? I'm just going to lay it out there. I'm a very modern reader. I've been involved with horror and very gory, gruesome stuff that we can see anything on the movies and the internet. I've been watching slasher films my whole life. Mm-hmm. So reading these stories and tales of terror that he wrote, they really are very tame compared to Hellraiser. During the time period, he was introducing gothic and scary, and he was very, 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 very scary for the times.
Yeah.
For the times. So we've been desensitized and ruined as human beings, 100 years later,
Absolutely.
Obviously. But
so who were some of the other artists during that time? Like, is this around the time of Mary Shelley and Frankenstein, like the Penny Dreadful?
So she was right around the same time. I don't think that they hung out together very often. He was poor, destitute, crappy. She's very upper class. Her and her other associates.
Take me back to Edgar, like from I'm Born.
Welcome to the world,
we don't
Mr. Poe.
I mean, I know that there are other documentaries out there, and I know that there's a lot of written information. But
there is.
For us, where does this little man
start
his life at?
He starts his life on January 19th, 1809. He is born in Boston, and he is the second child to two actors.
Dramatic, theatrical.
I guess I can say
flourishing is part of his vibe.
It's definitely in his genes.
Okay, cool.
How about that? So his mother, Eliza, she had been on the stage since she was a child. She was very beautiful. She was talented. She could sing. She could dance. She had this gorgeous singing voice. So she was the full package.
Nice.
The father, on the other hand, David Poe, he used to be a lawyer. That's what he started life as. But when he met Eliza, he decided to join the stage. He relied heavily on his dark, good looks and his rich, deep voice. Unfortunately, this is all he had. He was often booed and off stage and criticized for mumbling or forgetting his lines.
Aww.
Yeah.
That's so sad.
So he had the drive, but not the talent.
Okay. But a handsome, handsome fellow. He sounds similar to how Poe was described. Dark hair. Fairly good looking man.
I don't know. I kind of picture David, the dad, as more like tall, built, rugged good looks. And I picture Poe as, because he's slight of frame and he's like gothic emo good look. Not like Gaston. I don't know why I pictured David looking kind of like Gaston. Big, dumb, handsome.
So he's like, oh my gosh, the dude from Typo Negative, whereas Edgar Allan Poe is kind of like this little like emo band boy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen the man from Typo Negative?
I would have to Google that and
He's
to remember. I'm sure I have in the
7 foot tall and built like a brick house. He's tall, dark, gorgeous, and he sings in this really thick, deep voice. And, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That man is a very handsome man. But so they're both of the same vein, but he's like big and bulky, whereas Edgar Allan Poe is described as just this very slight, frail, tinier man.
Pale. Yeah.
He was very cute and handsome, but kind of
He's
in that
gaunt. Each to their own. You know, everyone's got their own.
Yeah, I would have gone for the frail, skinny emo boy. That would have been
Your jam, huh?
Yeah, that would have been my jam.
Well,
I mean, Typo Negative dude would have been my jam as well. I oscillate. I'll go both ways.
He's a lot of people's jams, as we will find out. And he's huge, just popular. What is this, 100 years later? More than 100 years, and we're still talking about him and his life and his works and his love affairs. Mm-hmm. So, obviously, he has captured the hearts of all of us. So dear old dad, big, beautiful Gaston Typo dude.
Okay.
Abandons them a year later. Good job, Dad. And he falls out of the picture. We never really hear about him. And then, unfortunately, his mother dies the following year. Most likely, this is from TB, tuberculosis. This is rampant around
during
this
that time.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. She was 24 when she died, and Poe was 3.
Oh, well, so he has it in his genes. I get what you were saying now. He has the theatrics in his genes, but he didn't really grow up with that family.
Right.
Okay. Does he have other brothers, sisters?
So he's the second child when he's born. He has an older brother, and then his name is William Henry Leonard Poe. I mean, that's just a mouthful for such a little guy.
Right.
So after handsome dad leaves, Eliza consoles herself with some unnamed person and gets pregnant and has Poe's illegitimate half-sister, Rosalie, who is an infant when Eliza dies.
Oh, very sad.
Yeah. Dad's gone. No one knows. So now there's the 3 Poe children orphaned when Eliza dies.
Oh my gosh. So what happens?
Well, I just want to say that watching the women he loves wasting away in front of him will be a tragic theme in his life.
Well, I mean, he's 3. He's just starting to really see and view the world. 3 is a big age.
Yeah.
To go through a very traumatic experience, there's a sense of awareness.
Yeah.
So, from very young. All right. Poor mom. Poor Poe. That's tragic.
Poe. I know. He is a tragic figure. I mean, I'm not going to say it's not for nothing.
Yeah.
that his life turns out. Okay. So, Poe's older brother, William Henry Leonard Poe, went to live with Dad, David Poe's family. His little sister, Rosalie, was adopted by a random rich couple. And Edgar, at the age of 3, is taken in by John and Frances Allen in Richmond, Virginia. So he's born in Baltimore. All of this happens in Baltimore, and he gets adopted by a family in Virginia. So he's taken to live with the Allens, and this is where he becomes Edgar Allan Poe, kind of in homage to the Allens, but technically they never formally adopt him.
Interesting.
He's never really an Allen. So in 1815, Allen takes the family overseas and sent Poe to a whole bunch of boarding schools in England and Scotland so that he could have the same really upper class education that Allen had when he was a kid. But he came across some really, really bad luck with his business and his business partner and this venture that he went overseas to launch, and it crumbled horribly and left him almost destitute. This is a very big, like, Rockefeller dude. He's very wealthy. And so he goes there and he gets bankrupted, and they have to return back to the States in 1820, and they are, like, penniless.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So 1825, Poe is 16. He's in Virginia. He loves writing. So he is fascinated with writing stories. He wants to be an author from a very young age. He has known this basically his whole life. So by the time he is 16, he starts to write this collection of verses and says that he wants to publish them and be an author. But the schoolmaster felt that while they were worthy of being published, he told Allan not to do it because it wasn't good for his ego. He said it was not good for him to be flattered and talked about as an author of a printed book.
Interesting. So schoolmaster was like, you are good, but you're also kind of a dick about it. And I feel like if you go and do this,
it'll make you more of a dick about it.
It's going to make you more. All right.
Yeah. So he's a young man. He's very athletic at this age. He writes and he's competitive and he likes to have all these contests. And so he, just to prove himself, swam 6 miles in the James River against a strong current.
That's really hard, actually. So
I believe it. But he carried this and like bragged about it a lot.
Hit 6 miles against the current swim.
Yeah.
It's a feat. It's really tough. But okay, so six miles against, and this is his claim to fame at this point.
Because they won't let him be a published author. So he's got to get his claim to fame somewhere.
I get it.
So this poor little orphaned guy, right? He's lost both of his parents. He's had both death and abandonment. And he really is struggling and wanting this father figure, and in particular mother figure. And he's just not getting it at home from the Allans. Allan in particular is really harsh, and he believes in pulling oneself up by their bootstraps, so he's not very affectionate. And then Frances, who they called Fanny, was always sick. Just another theme. The women in his life are always sick, and so she was not really there for him. She was always in and out. So at one point when he was in school, he latched on to this schoolmate's mom and like tried to make her a mother figure. Like, you know how you go over to each other's houses after school and whatnot, and she always has the cookies baked.
Oh, heck yeah.
Asked how your day was, and you feel special around her. Right?
Yeah.
Well, she gets sick and she dies in front of him.
Surprise, surprise. All right. So the theme continues to develop.
It does. So he's feeling depressed. He feels unloved, alone. He acts gloomy and moody and melancholy. So he's already a moody teenager, which, just throwing it out there, any of you that have teenagers or preteens, I feel you.
Yo.
And I see you. And
they're hard, man.
They're hard. So Allan's not appreciating this emo goth dude being grumpy teenager to him. And he's like, you should be grateful to me for picking your orphan butt out of the street gutters and educating you and dressing you and giving you this upper class life. You need to be more grateful. And
Absolutely.
You're not. Stop being such a D. So they fought all the time.
Surprise, surprise.
Big surprise. So over time, like as Poe gets older, he gets really big into gambling, and he's not good at it. So he very quickly accrues lots of gambling debts. Really, the only thing Poe is good at is writing. Just take that check for the rest of the podcast. Right. The only thing good he's successful at is writing.
That's fair.
Oh, so he keeps getting in trouble at school with gambling. And here's a fun fact. Poe went to a school that was founded by Thomas Jefferson, who it was founded on these really strong morals and principles. So there's no gambling, no tobacco, no drink. And he kept getting in trouble at school for gambling and drinking and being naughty.
And Dad is upset because he's wasting essentially family money.
Right.
He doesn't have a job.
Right.
He's going to school right now.
On Allan's dime.
And he is gambling it away.
Yeah.
Well,
like
fine.
His allowance. And he keeps coming, hey, Dad, I need to buy more school supplies, and then he sends him some money, and then he gambles it away and drinks it away. Or...
So does Dad eventually say, like, shenanigans, I'm out, we're not doing this anymore?
I don't know. He seems like a hard-ass Scottish dude. You'd think at some point he'd cut him off, and he does. Weird. So he cannot afford to continue his education at the University of Virginia, so he has to drop out after just 1 year. And he is actually now in debt of about $2,000 to $2,500. So to try to pay off his debt, he does some odd jobs as a clerk, and then he tries to write under the pseudonym Henry Le Rene. So this is probably kind of like a nod to his brother Henry Leonard, maybe. They don't really know. So he's completely unable to support himself, and Daddy Dearest will not help him. So he is forced to do what all poor people are forced to do at some point and join the military. So in May of 1827, he is 18, but he lies. There's a lot of themes in this story too about his lies and his deceptions and his shenanigans. He's not a very forthright dude.
Okay.
I feel, as the more I have learned.
But the more that it just seems like he was constantly presenting to the world this facade.
No, I think he will say or do anything to get what he wants. I think. I don't know. I don't even know how old you have to be to enter the army. I would think 18 is old enough to be in the army then.
Honestly,
why are you lying
like
to be 22? Yeah, right?
I mean, whenever I go back and watch like historical dramas and stuff, a lot of the young dudes that are enlisted in war are all 16.
Right.
A lot of them are Europeans. Maybe there's a difference.
Or they lie and they're 14 and they lie and say they're 16.
Yeah.
But why would you already be old enough and say that you're older?
Maybe he's thinking that because he is older that they would just be like, oh, well, then you're obviously capable of being something higher.
A better job.
A better job, maybe?
Maybe. Is there a legal drinking age at this time? Is he trying to say that he's old enough to drink?
18, 20 something.
27, yep.
I'm sure you could just roll up into the local pub at the end of your job at 6 years old and get a pint of something.
Yeah, right. No one cares.
Factory work was hard, man.
It was. Okay, so he lies. So he lies and says he's 22, and then he doesn't even use his real name. He says his name is Edgar A. Perry. He gets $5 a month. So those of us that are complaining about our wages now, imagine that. After a few months, he gets promoted and they double his wages. So that is $10 a month, folks. Woohoo.
Hey.
He does continue to write during this time. So at 18, he tries to publish his first book. It's about 40 pages of poetry, and it's titled Tamerlane and Other Poems, but the author is only listed as a Bostonian. So it didn't meet with much success, and it didn't even really have his name on it anyway. So he's in the military for like 2 years, and he's doing good. The stability and the routine and the consistent pay and being around people your age and stuff like that, camaraderie, it's good for him. He moves up the ranks and he makes it to sergeant major before he's like, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and self-destruct a little bit, and I'm going to try to find a way to get out of my 5-year contract that I signed. After just 2 years.
Yeah.
So,
all right. Well, follow through, Poe.
I know. Okay. That's what I'm saying. He doesn't follow his obligations a lot. Anyway, so he goes to his commanding officer and he's like, so, hi, my name's really Edgar Allan Poe and I'm really 20 and he wants to be honorably discharged. And his officer says, I will allow this, but only if you make up with your dad. I don't...
What? With stepdaddy?
With stepdaddy, yeah. I mean, obviously not David Poe, with John Allan.
Yeah. Okay.
I know, I thought that was weird, but, they're very big with, like, family and tradition and place in society and familial obligations.
I guess. But what was, I guess, the truth of his circumstances? The age?
Yeah,
like
his
that's
name.
Really his name and his age?
Yeah. I'm not really who I said I was. So he starts to write his dad for a bunch of months saying, hey, Dad, let's get together and let's reconcile. And his dad never answers. Alan never answers. Alan didn't even let him know that his foster mother, Fanny, was like real sick until it was too late and that she was dying.
Oh no.
Or dead, and it was too late in February of 1829. So Poe ends up arriving like the day after Francis Allen's funeral. So he doesn't even get to really say goodbye or anything, as that kind of sucks. But probably because John Allen's like really sad because his wife died, he allows him and Poe to make up. And he's like, okay, I will allow you to be discharged from the military. I'll give my consent. And I'm even going to give consent for you to go to West Point, which is the military academy in New York. He's like, so you're allowed to do this and we're a family again. And so Poe was formally discharged from the military April 15th, 1829.
Well, he succeeded.
He did. Yeah. So now he's happy with his family again. But he does have a period of time between his military service and when he starts West Point. So he goes to visit his family on his dad's side. He has this aunt that his older brother went to live with, right? At the very beginning of the story. His brother went to live with David Poe's family. Mm-hmm. And this is who he went to live with. Aunt Maria Clem and her young daughter, Virginia Clem. And then, of course, Henry is there as well.
The older brother.
The older brother.
Okay.
So he gets to stay with them, have some family bonding, and then in June of 1830, he goes to West Point. He starts school there. But by this time, Alan remarries a woman. Do you think that she's a beautiful old matron his age? Stepkids.
Well, no, that's not what dudes did back then. Mm-mm. No, they went and got themselves a new young woman.
Yeah, so let's see. His wife died in February of 1829, and in June of 1830, Mr. John Allan remarried a woman 20 years younger than himself. That's so awesome.
So, like a year and a couple months. That's not too bad.
So he really does start to distance himself from Poe at this point, and they start to kind of fall out, which is sad. So he's lost his mom, and now he starts to kind of lose
So
his
the
dad.
reconciliation is
short-lived.
A short-lived one with stepdad.
Yeah, until one day Alan just like officially disowns poor Poe.
What a guy.
What a guy. My orphan. I took in my orphan. You're not very grateful.
I wasn't bootstrappy enough to keep you. So I guess you're gone now, Poe.
All right. So Poe is now disowned. He's at West Point. I don't know any of you that are familiar with military schools, but they're not friendly places.
Especially in 1830.
I know, right?
Yeah.
And so Poe, after a very short period of time, decides that he needs to leave West Point. But you can't just drop out like a regular school. He literally had to be court-martialed and then discharged to be able to go. So he starts to refuse to go to formations, classes, and church, which means that he is officially brought up on charges of gross neglect and duty of disobedience of orders. So he knew that he would be guilty, but he pleaded not guilty in order to induce a dismissal.
Okay.
He was like, no, kick me out.
It's like I'm doing this on purpose, guys.
Yeah.
Anything I can to get kicked out.
Yeah. So now he is familyless Allenless, moneyless, penniless, no school. He moves around. He does a bunch of odd jobs. Eventually, he goes back to what he knows, and that's Baltimore and his Aunt Maria and his brother Henry and his cousin Virginia. And he's back to them in 1831.
Very nice.
Yeah. It's about this time that Poe begins to fall in love with his young cousin, Virginia. About this time, she's maybe 12. And he's in his 20s, young 20s.
Mid-20s?
Yeah. This isn't that unheard of. It's right on the cusp of we're starting to think that it's gross, and we're still okay with it happening in this period in our human history, which is really interesting. So the Poe family was kind of known for inbreeding, but I don't really call it inbreeding. I think it's more like keeping it in the family.
Yeah, I think at this point, society has kind of realized what happens with brothers and sisters inbreeding.
Oh, yeah.
And that it's still in the family, but far enough out of the family. Whereas it was much more common amongst cousins to be married as opposed to, like, brothers and sisters.
Right.
That direct connection.
But it's a really interesting connection too, and it kind of gets a little confusing here, and I'm going to ask everyone to just kind of bear with me, all right? His Aunt Maria holds a couple positions in his family tree.
Okay, so Aunt Maria is not just an aunt, but also...
Right. So this is David Poe's family, okay? David Poe has a sister, Harriet Poe, right?
Okay.
Their first cousin is Maria. All right. Harriet Poe marries this dude, William Clem. They have 5 children, but then Harriet dies. And William Clem stays in the family and marries his dead wife's cousin, Maria. Okay? So all of these 5 children are Maria's stepchildren, but also her cousins.
Okay.
And then she has Virginia with William Clem. So I think they're like all...
It is confusing,
yeah,
but I'm following along.
Kinda.
She was a cousin to Harriet. Harriet married William.
Mm-hmm.
Harriet dies.
Mm-hmm.
William goes back into the family tree.
That's gross, yeah.
To find someone else in the family.
Yeah.
To then raise those 5 children and have more children for the family.
So technically, Maria and Clem are not really inbreeding because they're only related by marriage, right? Not genetically.
Yes.
So ironically, I just want to throw out there, this is how Henry VIII excuses his divorce because he claims it's incest because he married his dead brother's wife. It's almost the same thing. They weren't really technically related genetically. They were related by marriage.
Right.
So,
and that's where...
yeah.
Yeah. Is they tend to...
Regardless, she was David Poe's cousin, making Virginia a second cousin. Regardless, like, Edgar shouldn't be dipping his ink in this well. And he does.
Not a good idea.
With Virginia.
But not unheard of for this time period. Her age and his age also. Disgusting.
Gross.
Not unheard for this time period.
14's a little young. They're moving out of that, like, marrying off 12-year-olds, unless you're royalty and you're making a political contract.
Right. And usually what happens is that young human is sent off to live with your family, trained, and you are not officially married until of age.
Breeding ability.
Once your period comes, then it is time.
Yes. You're a woman. Congratulations.
Sorry, ladies. It was a rough go.
Yeah.
But they're starting to change things. So it's seen as...
she's a little young, and it's a cousin. It's like a twofer, you know?
Yeah.
Maybe if it was one and not the other, but both of them kind of makes it a bit much.
They were not excited about this match. Poe was very excited about Cousin Virginia.
Yeah, he was. Yes, he was. So August 1831, older brother Henry dies from complications of alcoholism. So that's really sad. Drinking is a big part of Poe's life as well, which is sad. So he dies at the age of 24, which is the same age as their mom, Eliza.
That's really sad.
Young death, loss, wasting. Alcoholism isn't a fast disease.
No, absolutely not. You can go on for decades.
I'm pretty sure he, most of the days were like, why are they so young dying of alcoholism? Probably because they're drinking gut rot gin.
And they started drinking at the age of 6.
I mean, there's not any sort of like Food and Health Administration to make sure that you're drinking healthy things. So this could be like turpentine.
Like you could be drinking straight jet fuel.
You don't know. It's probably got rat urine. Ugh. So, I mean, God knows what they're actually drinking. So that's probably also contributes to its complications in his death at a young age of 24. So he starts spending the next few years. He's just barely scraping by a living. He's working by his pen alone, which means he's like writing articles and stuff like that. Sometimes he's not even getting paid for his articles or poems that he's trying to submit. Sometimes he like begs for investors or support to publish. So he's not very successful at this time.
Mm-hmm. No money, no family.
Was it a struggling artist? Starving artist?
The starving artist.
Poe
trope.
is the starving artist. Yes, cool. Yes. So March 1834, John Allan dies. He leaves his beautiful new young wife and 3 young children. Isn't he a busy old man?
Wowza. He ended up popping out 3 babies with that lady.
Yeah. They married in 4 years. They've been married 4 years and had 3 children. So he was enjoying his young bride, wasn't he?
Impressive.
So Poe had spent the last few years of Allan's life repeatedly asking for money and for help, and Allan never helped him out. He never gave him any money. And despite the fact that I know I told you he went back from Europe like completely penniless, but Allan's a bootstrap dude, and he remade his wealth and his fortune actually pretty quickly. And so by the time of his death, he was worth more than $1 million. And think about that, 1834. That's a lot of money.
That is a lot of money. Like the equivalent of $1 million now? Or...
No, $1 million then.
That was quite the turnaround.
Yeah. Any listener that wants to go ahead and do some fun conversion math, you go ahead. I'm not going to. So he was worth $1 million when he died, but he left Poe nothing. And he was not even mentioned or recognized in the will as a member of the family or anything. He was completely abandoned. So he's like, what am I going to do with my life? So he goes to Richmond, Virginia, and he starts to work as an assistant editor for this magazine called Southern Literary Messenger. So he's trying to help support his Aunt Maria, which from this point on, she likes to be called Muddy. So her name is Muddy.
All right, Muddy.
Yeah. So he's went to Virginia so that he could work and send money home to support Virginia and Muddy. All right, that's his situation. So Muddy wrote to him and said his other cousin made her this great offer that she's going to take. She just wanted to give Poe a heads up that this was happening. So this other cousin offered to take Muddy and Virginia and save them from destitution, give them money, put them up in a house, prevent Edgar from marrying Virginia, and he himself will marry Virginia when she becomes older. That's quite the package deal.
I would say so.
So she's like, we're going to take him up on his offer because he's this rich dude offering to take care of us.
Yeah.
This is a good deal for her. Poe freaks out. He starts like frantically writing letters to Muddy saying that this has grievously wounded his soul. He cannot bear the thought of being alone, and he will kill himself. But more rather, he will allow himself to die.
He's just gonna lay down and let death take him.
Right, he's so dramatic.
For reals.
He's like, oh my God, if I can't have her, I'm literally gonna die.
Listen, emo boy.
So he starts drinking. He starts spiraling out of control. And it's not really known if he was fired, if he just left, but he bounces and he runs to Baltimore to go find Virginia.
As one would do.
So September 22nd, 1835, when he was 27 years old, he married his 13-year-old cousin, Virginia Clem. The witnesses falsely testified that she was 22. Again,
that's disgusting.
Lying and false statements and doing whatever he felt was necessary to get what he wanted.
I mean, was Virginia into this? Do we know? Do we have her perspective?
I feel that she was so young when she met him that this was like that first introduction to positive affection from a male, and that first love and blush. You know, I'm sure she was with it. She definitely married him and went along with it, and her mom went along with it. Maybe it's a weird triangle. I don't want to.
They were like, we're going to do this. And he's like, no. This is what we're going to do. Okay, so he takes his new bride.
Yes. So he now is married. And now he has this like new mother figure, Muddy. And he takes them back to Richmond and somehow gets his job back at the Southern Literary Messenger. Only under the condition that he gives up drink for forever, because he's a bad drunk.
Most people are bad drunks.
I'm a fun drunk.
There are some fun drunks.
Sometimes too fun.
See? Bad drunk.
I.e. bad drunk. So Christmas 1835, this is like the best time in Poe's life. He is married to the woman he loves. He has this mother figure taking care of him. He has steady income, and it's in the literary field, so he gets to write all the time, and he's just really happy. He's got this little house set up, and they all live together, and it's just his best little life.
Well, that sounds really nice.
We only have so many works of his, but what no one really takes into account is the probably hundreds of articles that he wrote for these different magazines that he would work at, and all of these different articles and things, not just his personal works. But he starts writing content for the Messenger, and at some point around 1836, he's really starting to realize what people really want is not the same old drivel, right? They want something different. He says what they want is the ludicrous heightened into the grotesque, the fearful colored into the horrible, the witty exaggerated into the burlesque, the singular wrought into the strange and mystical. So he starts to write really weird pieces that are dark and kind of off, and he's really enjoying that.
Yeah. As are his readers.
So his role as editor for the Messenger is he was a critic of people that submitted other writings to other things. That's what people did. There is no TV. There is no internet. You write a bunch of stuff and you publish it, and everyone reads your writing and writes about your writing, and then you write about what they read. But that's what they did, because you have nothing else to do with your time. He is a critic, and he is very big into competition. He's big into one-man upmanship. He likes to prove that he is the smartest guy in the room. So he really takes a very evil pleasure in writing his harsh truths about other people's writings. So he calls out errors in spelling and punctuation and grammar. He points out questionable diction and syntax, and then he will accuse them of being vulgar or ill-educated.
Oh my goodness.
I know. It's really unnecessary sometimes. And he begins to establish this reputation of being a hard ass, and his name is the Tomahawk.
Okay.
Because his words cut you so deeply.
Ooh.
So this is also the association, or the reputation beginning to be associated with the Messenger. And the dude at the Messenger is not appreciating this.
Ooh. Okay. So Boss Man is like, meh.
Well, no one wants to send their stuff into the Messenger if this D is just going to, like, trash it.
Absolutely.
So he, the owner of the Messenger fires him in January of 1837. So Poe and his little family move to New York and basically fall off of the map for 2 years and probably experience periods of unemployment and destitution. We don't really know anything about him.
Okay.
Until he pops back up in Philadelphia in the spring of 1838, and he starts again doing a bunch of low-paying, small literary jobs at like different newspapers and magazines and stuff.
Okay.
So he's 30. He's in Philadelphia. He is living with his Aunt Mommy and his cousin wife, who is now 16.
Okay. So they've been married for like 3 years now.
Ugh, yep.
That's gross.
So in 1839, he gets his next big gig, and it's for this magazine called Burton's Gentleman's Magazine, owned by this dude named Burton. Duh.
Weird.
Yeah. So, and it's at this period of time that he comes across works of really large contemporary authors like Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Mm. You know, he actually accuses Longfellow of plagiarism at one point.
Ooh, that's kind of a big deal.
It is kind of a big deal. So he's really like, I don't think he has that great of a reputation in the literary field.
All right. He's kind of seen as like this, almost like a minnow in the pool who's like nipping at all of the big fishes.
Yeah, and like nipping with things like, you forgot a comma. And things like that. Like really, I don't know, really small, minor.
Like a tiny, tiny little angry man.
Yeah, kind of. So he continues to do his own writing through his whole life. He's always trying to get his own works published. Right. He likes to do lots of different collections of his own stories, and he kind of modifies them and re-releases them in different editions. Mm. One of these is the Tales of the Grotesque and Arabesque. And this gets a smattering of success. So he's finally starting to get recognized for his own writing as opposed to his criticisms of other people's writings.
That's fair.
If that makes sense. So he's starting to enjoy his own popularity. But as par of the course, he starts to get bored with steady employment, and he leaves after just a year. He's like, you know what? I should be my own boss. I'm going to open my own magazine. Yeah. I have not $2 to my name, but I'm going to open a magazine, and I'm going to name it The Pen. He lives in Philadelphia. It's kind of a play. Yeah. On a pen.
I know Penn State and stuff. It's sporty and colleges and stuff like that. Yeah. So that's William super fun, though. Yeah. The Pen.
Yeah. So he's going to do this, and he's going to be his own boss, and he's going to be free from being forced to model his thoughts at the will of men whose imbecility was evident to all but themselves.
Wow.
Yeah. So basically, he thinks that everyone in the world is an idiot, except for himself.
And he is no longer going to succumb to their idiocy level anymore. We are done with this.
Yeah.
I have had a minutely successful collection of short stories.
Mm-hmm. And now I am going to go conquer the literary world.
I can see why the schoolmaster said he should not be published. It will go straight to his head.
It'll go straight to
his head. Surprise. What does he do?
So he's trying to shoot for a release date in January, but, he's working a lot and he's getting really stressed. And so he actually gets really sick and he's got to push back his release date. At this point, really from this point on, he gets ill a lot. So this is due to chronic alcoholism, really poor diet. He didn't have the best quality of coats or shoes or being able to pay for coal to heat his house or, basically being poor. Being poor is bad for your health.
Yeah, we know this to this day.
Yeah.
Being poor is bad for your health.
So he doesn't have, nutritious food, all these things. So his health will continue to deteriorate and he will have bouts of illness for the rest of his life.
Right, with no real way to recover.
Yeah.
That's unfortunate.
So he gets feeling better in March and he's like, okay, let's do this. And he's going to release his magazine. And then Philadelphia experiences this huge financial crash. And all of the banks are brought to a halt or they're closed. Everybody is broke. No one's willing to loan Poe any money because, of course, he doesn't have any of his own money to do this. So once again, the pen is thwarted.
Sad face. Did they actually ever publish?
We'll get to that.
Okay.
We'll see. Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun.
So Boo, he has to take a real job. Don't we all hate that moment when we're chasing our dreams and they fail and you have to go take that real job because you got bills. So he went back. He met up with this guy named Graham who bought the Gentleman's magazine that he used to work for, right? And this dude Graham had this magazine called the Ladies Magazine. So he bought them and put them together and he produced the Graham's Ladies and Gentlemen's Magazine.
That's really clever.
I know.
Graham.
I thought that was really funny. So Poe just completely puts off, the releasing of the pen because he's got to go work.
He's got to go pay his bills.
Yeah. But he's able to resume being a critic and kind of flexing his, small dick energy.
I was just going to say.
Through
pointing out
jerk.
minor flaws in other people.
But what's really funny is at a certain point, he starts getting really fed up of just all of these submissions are just terrible. Your grammar is terrible. Your punctuation is terrible. So what he does is he begins to write articles that teaches people proper grammar and teaches people how to write correctly. So he actually becomes, in his life, he is more popular for his non-fiction contributions than any of his fiction writings that we obsess over today.
During his life.
His lifetime, when he is alive, he is famous. His reputation is for a non-fiction critic.
I love that, though. Instead of continuing to be a dick. I mean, he could have still been a dick in his delivery.
He probably was, but he hit a wall and said, "That's it! This is a comma, you illiterate bastards!"
I imagine that they were probably very similar to, Bilbo Baggins in his 111th birthday, where he's insulting everybody, and they're just too dumb to realize that they're being insulted.
He's using big words and all this stuff, and they're like, what? So yeah, he starts to become very popular for this.
Cool.
But let's also remember that Poe loves to be the smartest guy in the room, right? So he starts this series of articles where he tells his audience to send in ciphers, and if they can create really cool ciphers that he can't crack, and then he'll crack them and he will publish their ciphers and the decoded message, right? So these became really, really popular as people were trying to stump Edgar Allan Poe and find the uncrackable thing. So he's becoming really popular with this, and he's still submitting his own stories, but not really to much success. But fun fact, Americans have been obsessed with true crime since around 1840. So around this time, at 1841, when he was just 33 years old, there was this huge interest in detectives and true crime, and he published this story called The Murders in the Rue Morgue. This is in response to America's new love of detectives and crime solving.
Right.
This becomes one of the most popular and entertaining forms of fiction ever conceived. This is about a detective that is presented with this very unsolvable locked room murder, and he solves it using his brain and deduction and clues and evidence gathering and witnesses. And it's the first time that all of this evidence and science and using the intellect and reason to solve problems is. And this becomes a huge inspiration for Arthur Conan Doyle, who published Sherlock Holmes in 1887.
Nice.
Yeah. So Poe was the first detective novelist.
I'm super in love with that.
Yeah.
Poe.
Yeah, so he starts to become really popular for that.
Well, and I mean, still today, still to this time, like there are so many podcasters, YouTubers, like content creators that are super into diving into the world of true crime.
Yeah.
And telling the story of it. Which
Humans have always been fascinated with crime. We're sitting here talking about the macabre. It's just something about the dark that draws us.
It does.
Yes. So Poe goes up to his boss and says, yo, you should totally finance my magazine, The Pen. I will get all the writers and I will do all the editing. And his boss is like, okay, sure, why not? And so Poe starts reaching out to all of those authors that he has been belittling and insulting and insulting, criticizing, and humiliating, and even accused of plagiarism, and says, you should come work for me. Not only that, but you should sign a contract that I am the only place that you're allowed to contribute your work to for a year.
Okay.
I know. Surprisingly, no one jumps on this bandwagon. No one's like, please exploit me and treat me like crap for a year. That sounds great.
Yeah, that sounds real exciting.
So his plans for the pen are thwarted again. Super creepy fun fact. Poe really, really loved that his mother, Eliza, was a singer. She had a really pretty voice. She was very well known for being a singer, right? So super creepy. As soon as Poe and Virginia got married, he started training her to be a singer and teaching her how to sing. So one night in January 1842, Virginia begins to bleed from her mouth as she's singing, and this is the first indication that she has a fatal case of tuberculosis.
I'm sorry, she started bleeding from her mouth as she was singing.
Yeah.
What a horrifying moment.
Yeah, she probably started coughing, while she was singing and ended up coughing up some blood.
Another fly on the wall moment. I would have loved to be there.
I don't know. His thoughts of just instantly seeing the woman he loved sick again. I don't know. He kind of loses it after that, and he resigns from Graham's.
This is 3 to 4 months later after this incident. He resigns.
Yep. So he resigns. So he begins to suffer long periods of illness himself. It's not TB, tuberculosis, or anything like that, but he's drinking heavily from the stress of watching his wife slowly die in front of him. He drinks because he's ill, and he's ill because he drinks. This becomes a very vicious cycle. So, I think he really understands the problem of mental health and the struggles that really plague mankind at this point in his life. It's showing in his writings, and he's definitely a tormented soul. And he writes that the ghastly extremes of agony are endured by man the unit, and never by man the mass. Let us thank a merciful God. And I can kind of see where we all should be grateful that we all don't suffer all of the horrible mental illnesses and anxieties and depressions that can plague us. Because if we all had all of them,
right,
we would not survive as a species.
Well, and I mean, it's also to say that like bipolar is not an illness that you can catch from your neighbor. You know, that this is the affliction of man, not men. And I think that's very powerful. And I agree with him on that. Thank God that we don't just walk around and a whole town has
enduring all of it.
Yeah. That's insane.
We all endure our own personal hells enough. Can you imagine having to endure everyone else's as well? So, big surprise, he goes on a bender in New York. He tries to sell some of his stories, and he's unable. He keeps drinking. He goes to his ex-girlfriend's house. He makes a scene. He runs off. Like, he doesn't come home for, like, days. They find him in the woods a few days later. He's all disheveled and really doesn't remember what's going on.
Oh my gosh.
And this is really going to be the first of many drunken benders that sometimes lasted for days, left him with no memories, and almost always needed a recovery time of days or even weeks to recover from whatever shenanigans he got up to when he indulged.
And this is just in response to his wife being sick.
Yeah, he's watching her get sicker and sicker, and she gets better, and then you get worse. You know how it's like when you have a fatal disease, good days, bad days.
Yeah.
He's lost everyone in his life. He doesn't feel good a lot. You're struggling mentally. You're struggling physically. You know, you're poor. You don't know how you're going to feed your family tomorrow. Like, that's a lot of stress, and it's cold, and there's no air conditioning or central heat or ice cubes or McDonald's or YouTube. I don't know. Like, he has a rough time of it being a struggling, starving artist. So he is still the foster son of John Allan, right? He still went to these schools when he was a young boy that were upper class. He still knows these humans from military or his upper class upbringing that he had connections with. So he had one that was a friend that basically was like, hey man, I will help you out. I'm going to guarantee you a position as a clerk in the state customs house. So this is a really easy appointment. It'll be steady income. Let me help you out and do this. So he basically guarantees it, and Poe is like, okay. But when he reaches out to his bosses, Poe's reputation for drinking pretty much ensures that he does not get this job. And he is passed over for what Poe considers less qualified ruffians and boobies.
Ruffians and boobies.
So he does not have a job again. He's back in Philadelphia. He's unsuccessful finding jobs. He's watching his wife die slowly. During this period of stress and grief and loss, Poe produces 31 of his 117 pieces of work that he creates throughout his lifetime. So many of them began to gain in popularity, if not in financially. So ultimately, his entire pieces of work, he does 69 short stories and 48 poems. Again, this does not count the hundreds of articles that he wrote as his time working at these various magazines. Right. So, and through all of these different pieces of 31 works, you can really see the grief that he's experiencing, through this time.
And this is also not that he didn't have a lot of really difficult things that happened to him in his youth, right? I mean, his whole life has just been kind of this tragic story that he probably wrote himself.
Right.
You know what I mean? But you can really tell when you are going through something that is such an experience, when it relates to your art, like your art just gets crazy.
Yeah.
And it becomes what people really latch onto is that tortured work.
And you're pouring a piece of your soul into your writing and your personal thoughts and experiences during this time. And I think a lot of us still identify because we still have that loss and that grief. and sadness and darkness inside of all of us that we're constantly pretending isn't there so we can get through the day.
Yeah, but he was not pretending that it wasn't there. He was
acknowledging it, writing it, and putting a light on it. Yeah, he was. I think that this poem that I found from his really fits how I see him, as he really did feel like many of us do, that we are alone, that we are in the dark, that there is something maybe dark in us or something. So I have a poem of his, a very short one I would like to read. It is called Alone. From childhood's hour I have not been as others were. I have not seen as others saw. I could not bring my passions from a common spring. From the same source I have not taken my sorrow. I could not awaken my heart to joy at the same tone. And all I loved alone. Then, in my childhood, in the dawn of a most stormy life, was drawn from every depth of good and ill the mystery that binds me still, from the torrent or the fountain, from the red cliff of the mountain, from the sun that rolled me round in its autumn tint of gold, from the lightning in the sky as it passed me flying by, from the thunder and the storm and the cloud that took form when the rest of heaven was blue, of the demon in my view. And it just sort of shows how he felt. He didn't feel the same as others felt. He felt lost in his own thoughts. You know, he felt that there was kind of a demon in him ever since he was a child. In the dawn of a stormy life, he's always felt he's had this sad, tormented life.
Yeah. Well, he did.
And he
At the age of 3, losing your mother.
And your father, you were abandoned by your father.
Right.
Your mom dies. You're separated from all your siblings. Mm-hmm. Your foster parents don't really like you.
Not enough to adopt you, and it seems like any real love that he had was for Eliza and not... Was it Eliza?
The
stepmother.
Fanny.
Might have had some warmth and connection there with her, but that the relationship with his stepfather, John,
was harsh.
Very harsh. Very strained. Yeah. This man had very firm beliefs that you can lose it all and pick yourself up and start over, and proved it time and time again. And Edgar was
continually letting him down. He could never pick himself up. He could he was always borrowing money. He was always in debt. He's always begging his whole life. And probably
told this
by
Dad.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and he already knew in his heart of hearts that he was different.
Yeah.
You know, that he was
unloved
and uncared for by his father, and that his, you know, the one thing that he had in this world got, tuberculosis, and she died?
Well, I mean...
And now here he is and experiencing this all over again with his wife.
And he watches her slowly fade away until... On Saturday, January 30th, 1846, Virginia died in their home in New York. She is entombed in the vault of the people that owned the land that they lived in at the time. So she's not even like in a family plot or any... Well, she's in a family plot. It's just not her family.
Not her family.
They were renting a cottage on these people's land because, you know, they're poor. And it was an affordable option kind of out in the country. And so she was interred in their family vault when she died.
That is the saddest. And so The Raven was published, January 29th, 1845. So
right before... a year before she died. Watching her die, and everyone's familiar with The Raven, famous tale of lost love, lamenting his loss. Right. But what's really funny is he was paid $9 for that. And I actually did the math. You're welcome. That's about $294 today.
That's funny.
Yeah. And it was an instant success because, again, I think people really understand that loss.
Yeah. And for me, I think The Raven was about waiting for something to come.
And expecting. Right. And being told that it's not going to.
But I find it really, really interesting that January 29th, he releases it 1845, and a year and 1 day later. So on the anniversary, she dies the day after.
Yep, celebrating his success.
Of the 1 year of that success of that huge tale. I find that
at least she got to live at least a little bit to see some of his success, because honestly, he didn't even get to see a fraction of the success. If you go back to 1845 right now and tell him one day your face is going to be identifiable by almost every human, like you're on socks and backpacks and memes, and people rewrite your stories and make movies out of them and series, and it's like you are so well known. He would be flabbergasted because he's like hand to mouth his whole life, and people telling him that he's shit his whole life.
I think it puts it in perspective.
Crazy, yeah.
And he was a living person in that time, though, with a horrible reputation because he was a dick.
He was a dick.
Like, he was a dick. So I could see why that would prevent his popularity. And once you remove yourself from a person, and you're just left with the works of a person, we put so much inflection in that.
Yeah. We
feel that. And I feel like because we don't have that specific person sitting in the room with us.
Yeah.
As, so to speak, the same generation of. I feel like we can separate the artist from his works, or that we tend to more often when they are not a relevant current human being walking around.
Yep.
But that's very interesting, and that's very sad.
And on that amazing, sad, somber, appropriate note of loss and grief, we're going to conclude the first part of this 2-part episode. And when we come back, we're going to finish up the rest of Poe's life and some of the shenanigans that he got into, as well as finally discussing these works. We have purposely not discussed any of these works because we're going to talk about them a little more in depth and the relevancy of some of the pieces during these events that are happening in his life. So hopefully you had a good time with part 1, and we're really excited to see you next time for the conclusion. And hopefully you keep listening for the rest of October as we continue our spooky path of gore and mayhem. And thank you so much for listening to Histories Uncharted.
We'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.
Hey everyone, we just wanted to take a minute and thank you for listening to us here at Histories Uncharted. We know you have lots of options out there, and we are super grateful you chose to share this hour with us. As a brand new podcast, it takes a lot to get started in the beginning, so if you could please rate us, follow us, leave a comment, or even share our podcast with someone you think would love to hear a cool story. You can do one or all 3, but whatever you do, we would love to hear from you.